Hello and welcome to the Lazy and Entitled podcast, the podcast where we talk about life from the writer's perspective. I'm one of your hosts, Chris Corlew.
And I am the other one of your hosts, Brendan Johnson.
And this is certainly not the first episode of the podcast, but the first episode of the regular show, I think.
Yeah, we kind of did, I don't know, how many do we, 10 or 12?
Yeah. Before we had the Vine audiobook, and then we had the 2 Halloween specials, but this will be the regular show. We're starting out with 1, maybe 2 episodes a month, depending on what we have the time and energy for, and that's where we'll be at for the foreseeable future. To start, I thought we'd talk about the tagline, Life from the Writer's Perspective, which I ripped from an old college course I took called Literature from the Writer's Perspective, which is a great literature course in that you didn't have to read any theory or any of that stupid bullshit. You just talked about a book.
You just read books?
Yeah, and talked about them.
Did you just read one book?
No, we read a lot. We spent 6 weeks on the Odyssey, and then we read Lolita, we read Emily Dickinson's poems, we read the Anchor Book of New American Short Stories, which introduced me to Ann Carson, Amy Bender, George Saunders, Wells Tower, Lydia Davis, Diane Williams, a bunch of cool people. And we read Paul Celan's poetry, and we read another novel that I'm forgetting, but it was a really good reading list and a really kind of revolutionary way for me to think about literary criticism, which is from the writer's perspective, and we're talking about life from the writer's perspective, or the artist.
Yeah, I think the tagline was meant to be like a broad thing that would tie all this together, and so we're using writer kind of like creator type of perspective, artist perspective.
I also feel like the tagline means this is explicitly not a podcast about writing, really.
Yeah.
We're not going to be talking about craft. We'll be talking about songwriting some, I think.
Yeah.
But we're just talking about the way we look at things as writers and musicians and artists.
Yeah, and we want to bring in other people of those same sort of qualifications, however professionally or non-professionally that may be, for future segments too.
Exactly. And you said non-professionally, which brings me to what we want to talk about today in the inaugural Life from the Writer's Perspective segment is all the work you have to do that isn't your art. I think have always been told as writers that, and as musicians especially, that our art is never going to be our primary form of income, and we have to figure out another way of working. So we're going to be talking about working this week. Brennan, do you have any bits of unsolicited financial advice that you got between the ages of, say, 17 and 25? When you told someone that you wanted to be a musician, that sticks out to you?
Oh, man. I mean, it was mostly... No, maybe not mostly, but obviously the most often the answer was you should do something else. But I guess being in Tennessee and in Nashville in that area, there were often people who would present some sort of path forward in which you could theoretically be a musician and make a living.
Mm-hmm.
But I think when you're young and like that, you only have your idealistic view.
Right.
You don't,
Yeah.
You're not like, oh yeah, no, that does sound good to play a bar until 2 a.m. every night, 4 nights a week. But then, down the road, you're like, damn, no, that does sound good.
Take that. If I could play a bar till 2 a.m. one night a week, I would take that.
But yeah, I think maybe the other most common response was, what are you going to do when that doesn't work?
Right. Yeah. When I would tell people that I'm going to college to study creative writing, or I want to be a writer or whatever, I would either hear there's no money in that, or you're not going to make any money, or I would hear, this person was an ad exec who had offices in New York and LA, so he was taking these long flights all the time, and he wrote his first book on the plane just while he was taking flights, between working hours, and you could do something like that. Scott's like, oh, so you can write while you have another job. That of course is how life has turned out.
Yeah, but for sure. It's interesting because I think that it's easier to have a sort of more idealistic view of being a musician, especially like when you're in a band, of like you can do the tangible thing of like tour for 30 days, where that is like the entire space of time is kind of put toward that energy.
Right.
However true that is, whatever. But like you are gone for this purpose, right? For pursuing music. But whereas writing, it's almost the idea is that, yeah, you would have another job, and then writing is that thing that you do in addition, and then maybe one day that'll be successful, especially all the stories that you get presented of, Stephen King working as a janitor or whatever else. The idea
Right.
is straight out the gate of like, well, of course you wouldn't do this. Of course you wouldn't do this professionally until then you magically do.
Right. Until magically you unlock the key to like the billionaire's room and,
Yeah.
and like
So at least I had the illusion of like, oh, I'm in a van 40 days, like putting in the work. Whereas, like it's so hard when it's just words on your computer or words on your page that no one ever sees, and you're talking to people and they're like, oh, yeah, no, you're a writer, sure.
yeah. To also lead into what we're talking about on the show, I was always told stories of like, you get told stories. I feel like my grandmother would tell me stories of like the ad execs and the insurance execs and the people with like stable white collar jobs, and then everybody else would be like, so are you going to go wait tables? And I think that's been the story of you and I's professional lives. We've worked quote unquote low skilled jobs. I guess in 2017 I got my first copywriting job, so I've been in the corporate world too. But for the most part, we've been bartenders and servers, and you work in a cafe now. For me, and I think for you too, and I think for a lot of people in our generation, this has led to a bit of like a radicalizing interest in labor and labor history.
Yeah. I mean, I think that and I think probably it's always been around to some degree, but it definitely feels like in a moment to where it's really so evident across so many disciplines that there's this shared experience of, yeah, unskilled labor or just being part of the working class, because those are the type of jobs that would take you with a English degree or theater degree or whatever, or no degree, or they're the type of jobs that would allow you time and flexibility, right? Like, because the cafe, like everyone I work with almost is an actor, because it's the type of environment where you could, hey, I need someone to cover me because I'm doing auditions.
Right.
Next week I told someone, I'll cover you if you get that Starburst commercial, because
Sure.
I want them to get that Starburst commercial.
Hell yeah, absolutely. So with this episode and with future episodes of the podcast, we're going to be talking about labor and labor history, our experiences in these kind of working class jobs, and yeah, how it relates to our lives as artists, because you don't stop being an artist even if you are in your mid to late 30s and working in a cafe still, or whatever.
Yeah, and I think this comes back to our choice of production name, which we've used forever, which is Lazy and Entitled, a term given to our generation, despite all the evidence leading the opposite way, that we are in fact not lazy, and that our entitlement is we don't want a worse life than you.
Right. We don't want a worse life than we were promised in Robin Williams movies.
Yeah. So I think that, I don't know, now that we're talking about it here, it makes so much sense to me that, like, this podcast is going to be tied a lot to, I think, the idea of labor and working class things, and because that's, often the artist experience.
100%. And with that, we're going to segue into Storytime with the Shipwrecked Sailor, where I'm going to read an excerpt from Studs Terkel's book, Working. So I'm just going to read a few excerpts from this interview with Mike Lefevre, I think is how you pronounce his name. I'm not sure. Mike is described as living in a 2-flat dwelling somewhere in Cicero on the outskirts of Chicago. He is 37. He works in a steel mill. On occasion, his wife Carol works as a waitress in a neighborhood restaurant. Otherwise, she is at home caring for their 2 small children, a girl and a boy. At the time of my first visit, this is Studs, a sculpted statuette of mother and child was on the floor, head severed from the body. He laughed softly as he indicated his 3-year-old daughter. She Dr. Spocked it. This quote. So I guess she Vulcan neck gripped the mother of God to death. Here's how Mike describes his job. I'm a dying breed, a laborer, strictly muscle work, pick it up, put it down, pick it up, put it down. We handle between 40 and 50,000 pounds of steel a day. I know this is hard to believe. From 400 pounds to 3 and 4 pound pieces. It's dying. So that's how Mike describes his job. He says a lot of other things to say about his job, but that's the, his job in his life. But that's the overview. What really interests me about Mike is how much he is very much the kind of guy who works at a steel mill. He goes to work, he comes home, he doesn't like to talk about work, he likes to drink after work, but he takes his family responsibilities seriously. He hates his boss. Pretty average guy, but he reads and he's into the arts and he has a lot of thoughts about intellectuals. He's talking about a younger foreman at the mill who was giving him a hard time about some stuff. And this guy who approached Mike, quote, he saw a book in my back pocket one time and he was amazed. He walked up to me and said, "You read?" I said, "What do you mean I read?" He said, "All these dummies read the sports pages around here. What are you doing with a book?" I got pissed off at the kid right away. I said, "What do you mean all these dummies? Don't knock a man who's paying someone else's way through college." He was a 19-year-old effete snob. Then Studs cuts in. "Yet you want your kid to be an effete snob." This is Mike again. "Yes, I want my kid to look at me and say, 'Dad, you're a nice guy, but you're a fucking dummy.' Hell yes, I want my kid to tell me he's not going to be like me." Skipping about a paragraph down, Mike gets onto this idea he has. Quote, "I'd like to run a combination bookstore and tavern." Then he laughs. "I would like to have a place where college kids came and a steel worker could sit down and talk. Where a working man could not be ashamed of Walt Whitman, and where a college professor could not be ashamed that he painted his house over the weekend. If a carpenter built a cabin for poets, I think the least poets owe the carpenter is just 3 or 4 one-liners on the wall. A little plaque. Though we labor with our minds, this place we can relax in was built by someone who can work with their hands, and his work is as noble as ours. I think the poet owes something to the guy who builds a cabin for him." So I wanted to bring that into our first episode and have that kind of ghost over the rest of the podcast. We are artists who are working people. We're going to be talking for artists who are working people and to artists who are working people. But we also owe working people who are not artists something too. And yeah, have that passage from Studs and Mike, whose last name I can't pronounce, who lived in Cicero, be the epigraph for this whole podcast.
I really like that. Thank you.
And now welcome to our segment, What Do You Do All Day? Which is going to be what it sounds like, where we just talk to people about what a typical workday looks like.
Yeah.
Our first interview is going to be with resident guitarist, actor, writer, barista, kitchen manager?
Yeah.
Sure. Brendan Johnson. Welcome to the show, your own show.
Yeah, excited to be the guinea pig for this segment.
Yeah. I don't think I got any of your titles right because I've never really known any of your titles.
I think I'm so resistant to calling myself those things out of some misplaced, inadequacy or something.
Sure.
Because I was like, oh yeah, I guess I am kind of an actor right now. Historically, I never think of myself that way. At least not anymore,
Sure.
Not
I guess
for a
I never
long time,
stopped
but
thinking of you as an actor.
Yeah, I guess it is a part of who I am and my experience, and I do try and bring out the theater degree and be like, because I have this, here's my opinion.
Right.
Hamilton elected Trump. But yeah, no. In the cafe space, I am barista trained, and I do enjoy being a barista. I love coffee and espresso. But yeah, my official title is kitchen lead.
Kitchen lead,
So,
that's what it is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I think they would be fine if I call myself kitchen manager.
Sure.
But yeah.
Well, cool. Yeah. Our first question is, this is the longest question.
Yep.
It's a three-parter. What did you want to be when you grew up? What did you either study in college or do when you became an adult? And what do you do now?
Yeah. Okay. First off, I should say I didn't prepare because I feel like I'm going to be better unprepared.
Oh, yeah, that's the actor in you. Yeah.
When I was a kid, a classic dream, I wanted to be a paleontologist.
Hell yeah.
I was a dinosaur kid, as so many kids are. I had a dinosaur-themed birthday party in which my mom spray-painted T-Rex tracks on my driveway and my sidewalk, and Chris is nodding his head because he remembers them. They
Hell
stayed
yeah.
forever. Like, into high school they stayed. I also was very fortunate that my family like had an opportunity and took my interest seriously enough that when we were like 5 or 6, when I was 5 or 6, they took my whole family on like a paleontology dig with, I don't know how my grandparents knew this man, but he was a paleontologist. He took us to a site in Florida and we like combed the river. My remembrance of it is, this is hard and I don't want to do this.
Yeah, that's where that would go. Yeah.
My brother, I think, found a beaver tooth or something
Hey,
that was
cool.
like a fine. So that's what I wanted to be when I was a kid. But shortly after that, I feel like I did get bitten by the acting, performing bug from church.
Sure.
Like there was, doing church dramas and things. And then, so the dream of like being an actor kind of was the tail end of childhood dreams. Chris will remember I did audition for Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?
You did the little kid who threatens to shoot.
9 or 10 or something.
Yeah, and you
I went to
learned
the
you
big-
didn't get it when the movie came out, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, I figured I would. I
Right.
didn't get it. But yeah, it was a cattle call, and my mom was like, do you want to do this? And I said, yeah, and I think she pulled me out of school to do it. But yeah, that was, I guess, a childhood dream. Leads to the next question of what did I study when I became an adult, or what I kind of become interested in. In high school, obviously, we were super into music and playing music, and I knew that that's what I wanted to do, but I also knew that I needed to go to college, and I had scholarships to go to college, so I went to college for theater and pursued the band at the same time. It did both I balanced both of them as far as you can get a theater degree with not being involved, but I was involved. I did all the shows and shit, and my last semester I did a trip to Honduras.
Yeah,
and was
that's
Cat in
right.
the Hat.
Yeah. I forgot about Cat in the Hat and Honduras, but
Yeah.
both those happened. You did Mother Courage when you were in college?
Yep. I played guitar. That was a cool blend of music and acting. We did, Bertolt Brecht's Mother Courage, Outside.
Yeah.
And
I went to
played
that.
guitar.
That was fun.
Yeah, that was very cool. Yeah, but I did a bunch in college, both college theater, some community, and I was in a band and eventually dropped out of college.
And y'all went on
Pursued a
tour
band.
while you were in college.
Mm-hmm.
Like you would go in summer break, winter break, you would go on tour.
Yeah, the first time I ever toured was, I think, my freshman year of college, December 26th to January 3rd. We did a southeastern tour.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that was college break essentially.
Yeah.
The other members of my band were in high school. So
That's right.
cool.
That's right.
They were so cool. Spencer was a junior in high school the first time he went on tour.
Spence would be a junior and Scott would be a senior. Is that right? Yeah.
Crazy.
Wild.
But yeah, so when I studied, I was still pursuing music and studying that in a non-school context, and then I was studying theater, doing acting in college. Yeah. And then what's the final question?
The final part is, what do you do now? And this can be, I guess we don't have to go through the whole history of, you dropped out, went on tour, went back, got your degree.
Yeah.
What do you do now?
Yeah, so at this exact moment, and pretty much since then, I've worked in the service industry in some form. Busser to server to bartender to manager. I worked hospitality in a ski resort. So I've just kind of been in a lot of different service industry or hospitality public facing type of jobs. I would describe for the last 15 years or whatever. So in the present moment, I'm a barista. And then in that time, I've thought several times, I'm done with music, and just never been truly done with music. And in fact, I think I'm like more, in a lot of ways, more involved in it than I ever have been, which
Sure.
is very cool as far as like personal writing and not needing concrete terms like I am in this band or whatever.
Right.
And then I actually am currently doing some acting and writing with you as well.
That's
so
right.
That's kind of like what I'm doing right now.
That's what we're talking about. I mean, you work at a cafe, and then you make art when you can. This is an open-ended question, open to any interpretation you want. What is your community made of?
I'll try and keep it brief, but I'm going to answer in probably a few different ways. My direct community in the physical sense is Rogers Park, a neighborhood I'm very proud to live in.
Rogers Park rules.
It's a very diverse, it's the northernmost lakeside neighborhood in Chicago. And it's a very diverse, historically affordable neighborhood. It's gone through periods of difficulty, like I think a lot of neighborhoods do in its shape. But I want to say traditionally artists have often been in this area.
From what I can tell.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like I said, it's also diverse just in cultures. It's one of the things I value about being in this community is there are people of all places and walks of life.
Yes.
Even harder walks of life. This is also an area that has a lot of treatment facilities, so you do encounter a lot of people who are experiencing hardships in one way or the other. And I feel connected to that community, and I want to be more connected to that community. And in that sense, I am just a neighbor in that community.
Hell yeah.
That's how I am in Rogers Park. I also work in Rogers Park now. I work in the most southern part of Rogers Park I ever have, but I have also worked in a northern area of Chicago, of Rogers Park. So I've been a worker in the neighborhood as well. And then my broader community, I think, in a more family, friend, emotional type is, I am a friend and a very honorary uncle and godfather.
You are?
I'm also a real uncle, obviously, too.
Yeah.
And then I think I'm the, online artistic presence. I am I have the smallest digital reach I've had in years.
Sure.
And I think I'm presenting myself as a musician and as a writer. And I realized I think in that world, like my artistic world, I often am funny. I don't think about myself that way all the time, but I am doing sketch comedy right now.
Yeah.
And also my songs, they just have humor to them.
They do.
It's something I value, and I like that sort of thing. It's not that I don't take it seriously, but it's just that I like to be silly, and sometimes I like presenting a darker topic in a very pop or polished or lighter, non-dark way. Because I think it's funny and interesting.
Funny, yeah. Switching gears, I really like that you said you are a neighbor.
Yeah.
I think that's a great way to think of yourself.
You know, and I have really started leaning into that because of you, I think, and walking when I was nannying with you and being with your son, my godson, that was the language so often used of when we're on the sidewalk and they're zipping around on scooters, of just being be mindful of your neighbors, we all share this space, and
Right.
thinking about it that way of yeah, I am a neighbor. There are people that I see in the neighborhood. There is an older person than me that I see when I walk to work in the morning. Mm-hmm. And the other day, it was 10 degrees and it's 6:50 or whatever. And I'm walking to work and she has her dog out. And I know every time I see her, she's going to say good morning to me. And there's this moment where I'm bitter about it because I don't want to say anything.
Yeah.
And then I'm wait, no, that is the exact world that I want.
It's what you want to live in, yeah.
This person wants to say good morning to me. I don't have to stop and talk. They don't want anything from me other than just the baseline human acknowledgement.
Yeah.
We share this community and space. Good morning.
Yeah.
Which is a beautiful thing.
Yeah. You start talking about walking to work. What do you do all day?
Because I work in a coffee shop, and this is also with intention. After years of being in the restaurant and service industry, I wanted a more daytime oriented job.
Sure.
I also think quitting drinking and just aging in general, I still like to be a night person, and I like staying out late even sometimes.
Yeah.
But I don't want that in my day-to-day work
You
life.
want it on your own terms.
Yeah, I kind of want it on my own terms, and I want that to be like a thing that's just purely for fun, not for I worked till midnight and now I'm taking the train home.
Right.
So anyways, yeah, I work at a coffee shop. I wake up, my shifts are typically 7 or 7:30, and so I am pretty much just go out the door. I don't, like, more than ever, I feel like I have such a good relationship with sleep that, like, I wake up and give myself 20 minutes to be out the door.
Interesting. Okay.
And
you're not a morning shower.
No.
Okay. I can't do anything until I've showered.
Yeah, but especially if I'm going to work, I'm about to come
Sure.
home smelling like a
Yeah.
cafe, so no, I don't want to shower before work. No, I wake up and pretty much I try and drink like a big glass of water and say hello to the cats I usually feed them. And then I brush my teeth and I just go out the door. And I do bring a small breakfast. I've never been good at eating breakfast. I think my frame and metabolism or blood sugar, whatever, like often I just don't feel it. Like I want to, but I just can't.
Sure.
So I'm usually like a granola bites from Trader Joe's kind of guy.
There you go.
Treat yourself to a donut from Dunkin', which of course there's one on my walk to work.
Right across the street.
I am very fortunate that I can walk to work. I've been able to do this at my last jobs, including nannying.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a half-hour walk. Some people aren't strong, but I am. And I will walk a half hour. I don't care.
Built different, yeah. You will walk half hour to nanny my neighbor's kids.
It's awesome because this is a form of physical activity too. Like this, I get to build that into my work day. So my commute is active. I'm not someone, I very rarely listen to headphones when I walk to work, especially.
Okay.
I'm not like a wake up. Although I am very chill in as far as I can just wake up and go, I don't necessarily want to start with like a bunch of music. I kind of like settling my brain on my like 15-20 minute walk to work of just like thinking and just kind of like it's almost like a form of meditation to like start my day.
Absolutely.
And then I at a coffee shop, mind if I'm opening. Again, I don't turn on all the lights because you don't want people coming in early, which they will do. Don't do that. Don't do that. Don't do that. There's a sign on the door that says the hours. Also, you can use context clues. If there are chairs on the table and there's lights off, we're not open. Don't come in.
Yeah.
You wouldn't do that anywhere else. You wouldn't stand outside a Gap and be like, let me in. Man, let me in.
When I worked at the bookstore you and I both used to work at, not at the same time, there would be people yanking on the doors at like 7:57 or whatever, and it would always give me such anxiety. I just had like anxiety anyway, but like, so like, I'm like, all right, I'm getting ready for I was not as good back then at getting up early as I am now, and I would be like, okay, 8 o'clock, gotta open the store. Let's do it. And I just hear this yanking, and it would take me out of my zen completely.
Yeah, that will ruin an open for pretty much anyone. But yeah, when you open I'll try and speak both specifically and broadly, but because people might not know this about places like this, service industry places, but hopefully when you come in, it's clean from the night before, but you do, there's a number of things, taking down the chairs and all that sort of thing. At a coffee shop, if it's a good coffee shop, you need to dial in the espresso every day and then throughout the day. And when you dial it in, that means you're making sure all of the measurements of your recipe are right. So, for example, our recipe would be 18 grams of espresso in, 36 grams of espresso, like dripped espresso out, and that should take 30 seconds. Okay. So you have all these benchmarks. You just have to adjust the grind and the weight until you have that right, and then your shot should be theoretically perfect within the range of which you've determined to be a good taste. That's a really cool practice. I don't get to do it that much because, again, I'm like food and I don't have much practice at it, but I find that's such a very cool moment of zen for a barista.
Definitely.
A little peek behind the curtain of like, people don't think of that. So much of what I'm going to talk about is, I feel like on this podcast, is people don't appreciate quote unquote unskilled labor. And I think this conversation's been had more in recent years, but just like, working in a restaurant is not easy. Like, to think that working in a fast food place would be easy is the most
God.
insane thought.
Yeah. You're doing nothing all day but flipping burgers. Like, fuck you.
Yeah, no, you are in fact working really hard all day long.
Yeah.
That's what you are doing. But anyway, so yeah, open up the coffee shop like that. A typical day for me would be, at this current moment, is we're like a kind of quick serve restaurant, so there's no cooking raw food, anything like that. It's just a line cooler and an oven, and we do things like bagels, breakfast sandwiches, BLTs, really easy kind of stuff like that. So it's all kind of quick service. Nothing should take more than 6 to 8 minutes when it's slow, and if there's a line, 15 minutes maybe.
Yeah.
Our clientele, for perspective, on our coffee shop is largely Loyola kids.
Sure.
But there is a good sense of community of people who aren't involved in Loyola that still live in that area of Rogers Park.
That's good.
Edgewater border, and come to the coffee shop. Yeah, so things that you do as far as like kitchen thing would be receiving bagels, putting them away. Prep is something that kind of currently happens in service. So there's anything from slicing onions and cucumbers using like a julienne or a mandolin rather, and then slicing tomatoes by hand, moving cream cheese from one container to the other. I have like such specific methods about the like craziest stuff.
You have
like,
to, yeah.
Like, I have so much specific useless knowledge. I feel like there's like maybe 50 people on planet Earth that I could like impart some like key things to.
Right.
Like, if you are buying Smart Life veggie bacon and you want to separate it easily because it crumbles like Play-Doh, what you have to do is freeze it completely, and then, this sounds crazy, and then thaw it in the refrigerator. But within your thawing it of like 12 hours, that's when you have to separate it. I don't know why, but it's just easy to like peel it apart. But any other time, it's going to crumble like Play-Doh and you're going to be so mad. But I'm so good at it. They're perfect little fake bacon strips. But anyone in jobs like this, they have so many things of like, no, this is in fact the best way to roll silverware.
Yeah.
No, this is in fact the best way to clean, I don't know, a mop sink. You know, a mop bucket. I have so many thoughts about mops. People don't have thoughts about mops. I do.
Yeah.
I have methods in a restaurant that I'm no longer at that I'm pretty sure they still follow my system, because it was the only way in which to keep a clean mop head and to count on staff would be able to do it, right? Because there's like some expectation of just like, staff's not going to do that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so anyways, that's kind of like the idea of prep on the line. At the end of the day for me, I am now closing and cleaning all of that. While my shift is running, I'm scheduled for 8.5 hours, so that when I take my 30-minute unpaid break, I still get my full 8 hours.
Sure.
If I was scheduled for 7.5 hours, the way that labor laws in Illinois, I would be able to only take a 15-minute paid break. So I made the call of like, I want to be scheduled an extra half hour so I can get my full 8 hours, which is another compromise that you have to make in roles like this, where in a salary position you wouldn't have to make any sort of compromise like this.
Well, even at when I worked at am I saying where I worked? Yeah, when I worked at Groupon, we had that same built-in 40 hours with an unpaid 30-minute lunch break. But if you went and got food and then brought it to your desk, you just eat through.
Yeah.
And you didn't have to code a lunch break into your time card, is what I'm saying. And when my wife got pregnant, I was like, yeah, I'm not taking a lunch break anymore. I'm just going to go down to the cafeteria, because I was never good at bringing my own lunch. Yeah. I'm just going to go down to the cafeteria, grab some food, come up to my desk, and I will write while I'm taking bites of burrito. And,
I love that. Yeah. I do bring my lunch. Right now I'm actually on this current train of a personal and professional thing where I'm trying to bake bread.
Yes.
This year, and I'm not going to buy bread. So
you're making your own sandwich loaves and stuff?
Every day this week, I brought my own bread for my sandwiches.
Perfect.
I am lucky that I have an oven and I can make like kind of nice sandwich for myself at work.
Yeah.
So I do have a nice sandwich at work. That's how I eat. I do drink a lot of coffee in my day. I also drink a lot of water. I've always been a water person, or at least in my adulthood, have been a big water proponent. Yeah, but then the end of a shift would be cleaning. You have to clean down everything every day at the end of your shift to cover it all. There's a vacuum to vacuum up crumbs and such.
Yeah.
Food vacuums are very interesting as far as just, I don't know, I never thought about a restaurant would have a vacuum that they just vacuum food and stuff with, but we do.
They should give those to new parents, too.
Yeah. Yeah, you clean the cutting board, you clean the oven grates, you clean everything every day, you restock every day, you do all your dishes and everything like that. Then I walk home. And then on a typical day, I will get home before my wife, and I would probably use that space to maybe do some work on music as far as like if we had something sitting around like I needed to mix or something. But I'm also very good at engaging in like creative play.
Yeah.
Something I did after Christmas last year, and I know I talked to you about, was something like I would set aside just 45 minutes to record a thing, whatever that thing may be, every day for like, I did it for like 10 days, and then I kind of went back and could listen to them. But it was, that was a good practice as far as like building into, I'm working, I have stuff to do, but if I can set aside this pretty attainable chunk of time, 45 minutes,
Yeah.
it both make sure I'm doing something, but it also, because you have a time limit, because you're just playing, like you're taking bigger swings all the time.
Yeah.
And those 10 things I think were like, it was such a good practice for me.
Yeah. I need to get back to that. I used to have a thing where I was telling our friend Tracy about this, who's also a writer. She was complaining about like struggling to find time to write, and I was like, well, what I do is I think if I shower every day, why can't I like listen to one album and write for that whole album? You know, I'd set like an album as like a timer, you know, and just be like, all right, I'm just gonna write a chapter or write like 8 lines of poetry or whatever, but I have somewhere between 32 and 44 minutes to do it, you know. And I've gotten away from that in the last couple months, and I need to get back on it. But I love that you are like, yep, 45 minutes. I'm just going to do whatever. Like, I'm going to play. Great.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing is for a practice when I'm talking about trying to actually come up with something like that, like have an end thing, even if you don't use it, but like something at the end that shows you did something.
Right.
Is that like that practice is good because it like the hardest thing is just putting words on the page, just putting music down of like, it's easy to think I'm going to put on a 40-minute album and write for that period of time, but if the actual struggle is the putting the words down,
right?
Like the thing that you have to practice is that 40 minutes. You have to. That's right. The deal is you have to.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter what it is. You have to do it. And I think giving yourself, for me at least, giving yourself the permission of like, I'm not coming back to this. Like I'm doing it, and I'm not going to then open it up tomorrow when I come home and try and go back to this. Uh-huh. I'm opening up a new thing tomorrow, and that other thing I'm not listening to, I'm not thinking about. Hopefully I've forgotten what it really was. You know, I might know it was kind of like a synthy minor thing or something, but like I might not be thinking these are the chords I played, this was the melody I was like messing with, whatever. You just let it go, and then, like, for me, I found it helpful to give myself, okay, I'm going to do, like, 10 of these. I don't know if I set that out at the beginning, but I did have, like, I want to do this for, like, a week at least before I go back to any of it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I try and squeeze in, like, some sort of creative practice of every day, even if that's just playing guitar. I think you should play guitar if you're a guitar player. Like, it's just good for your soul.
Yeah.
Just pick it up.
Yeah, it makes you feel better.
You know, I am a person who tries to play scales like every day, like do the rudiment kind of stuff every day to keep sharp, but like just pick it up and play some chords every day. Playing a riff every day or whatever is just like the easiest thing to do for like a musician, I think. I don't know. I guess the equivalent maybe for a writer is reading.
Yeah.
Like trying to read a little every day.
I would say so,
even if it's something small.
I think I kind of think of reading as like running your scales, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Just something to engage with the practice in a way that, is active in some level, but doesn't have to be such a big deal. It's harder to do that sort of thing, I think, with like painting. Like it's hard to be like, let me whip out an oil painting real quick. Although Bob
that's
Ross
what sketching is for, maybe.
Yeah, sketching. Yeah, I mean, which I do. I'm like a doodler.
Yeah.
Like, as another practice, because it's just like a very rewarding thing to do in small chunks.
Yeah.
I am I don't know. I often cook dinner, so
Sure.
I'm also a make food all day person, come home and then make more food.
Sure.
But I like it. I find it to be like a nurturing thing on many levels.
Yes.
So I am a make dinner most nights kind of guy. Hopefully my wife is home at this point, and on a typical evening we will probably watch something that we're either like engaged in, like a movie, or a show that we watch, or we'll put something on that's kind of like non-committal, and we will draw or sketch or paint. We've been doing a lot of that together, which is a fun practice. That's kind of like a typical night. I try and go to bed early-ish, I guess. For some people, I'm probably in bed by 10 to midnight, somewhere in there, depending. I do find that I can get like just 6.5 hours or whatever, and I'm okay.
Yeah.
That's kind of my day.
It's not a bad day.
Yeah, not too bad.
Yeah. I think if 22-year-old me knew about that day, I'd be like, well, I'd rather not be working at a coffee shop, but you are doing something artistic every day, so it's got to feel good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what's the perfect day off then?
Man, I am like, I had therapy today, so I had to talk about self-care already, but I am like, in this sense, I'm just like, I was thinking about a perfect day off. I think it's just a day in which I get to just like kick it with my loved ones. I think
Sure.
that's kind of like, I'm so, I don't know. I've come to a point to where like relaxation, I don't feel like is a huge problem.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Like I'm giving myself space all the time to like chill.
Yeah.
And so like I do like chilling on my days off of doing nothing, but I also like just spending time and doing something like we just went to the Field Museum. That's like
Field Museum's great.
Like a day off kind of look for me. We live by the lake with intention.
Yeah,
so like
absolutely.
Chicago's a beach town, and we spend a lot of our days off by the beach. Yeah, I think an ideal day off is one in which I can sleep in as much as I like to, which is not much, 8:30 or 9.
Mm-hmm.
Drink a couple French presses of coffee with my wife. Make us a nice breakfast. Then, yeah, try and get outside. Try to engage in something that I think, if I'm trying to broad strokes it, some sort of cultural, like, type of thing, artistic type of thing.
Yeah, my go-to is always like street festivals. I'm like, I want to go to a museum or a street festival.
We're going to a museum, or we're seeing music, or we're going to, like, we go to clubs sometimes, or like we're big movie people, so like we do try to go to the theater. I also think just at my current life, I would love to be able to go out and experience more of Chicago's restaurant food life.
Yeah.
So in this ideal day off, I have the money where every day off I'm able to do that.
That would be, there's an ideal day off.
On my perfect day off, we can commit to both making a meal at home for ourselves and going out and enjoying one of the like endless culinary options in the amazing city that we chose to live in.
Yes. So, hell yeah.
And then, I guess I should be truthful with the audience, like, I'm going to be smoking some weed this day.
The cannabis is happening.
Yeah, I guess I should be, but that's just a part of the day. Yeah. And I probably did get an afternoon coffee. If I'm being real, my perfect day off, I probably got an afternoon cortado.
That's a cortado's a good afternoon day off drink. Yeah.
Well, we had I think it's the Swedish invented it. It's called fika. They do it during their workday, but Ash and I love it where it's just like you set time aside to have an afternoon coffee and a sweet thing.
Hey, all right.
Sorry, I'll actually talk about this real briefly. Fika is a cool practice. I think I'm right, and it's the Swedish that have originated this.
I mean, it sounds like English high tea, too.
But yeah, it's basically built into their work days at almost all offices. somewhere in between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. or something, you're going to go and have fika. And you're going to go and have a coffee and maybe a series of like small cakes or sweet treats. And you're going to talk with the people that you work with in whatever, like your whole building. Like it might be someone who you don't work directly with or whatever. And it's not necessarily a time that you have to talk about work or whatever. It's just like something that they believe is like good for workers and productivity and your soul or whatever.
That's great. Mouse Company has like, it's certainly not every day. I don't know how often they do it, but like sometimes we're just like, yeah, this afternoon we were going to get together and play Jackbox games or whatever because everyone was work from home. But yeah, that's a good practice.
It does seem like a really good practice, especially for like an office environment. Of course, we don't do it here, but like it makes sense that it would be some country that values like the employer or employee like happiness and health a little bit more.
Yeah.
But just it I don't know. There's probably like some Vox video essay. Just look it up, FIKA.
Yeah.
But it just gave me the sense that it was like a really good moment to like disconnect from work and connect with humans, and to like not centralize your labor as far as like this is a break in your day to do this that's separate from your lunch break or whatever else. Also caffeine. It's like let's go get drugged up. Like
right.
More offices should do that.
Yes. More offices should encourage drug use. And then so to wrap up, do you have any immediate goals or hopes?
Yeah, I mean, we were talking about this. 2025 is a big creative year for us.
Yeah.
And yeah, so we have 2 albums for sure coming out this year. I would say that's an immediate goal of like that sort of thing.
Yeah, the work is on your plate for those right now.
Yeah, for right now, yeah. And then, of course, 2025, Lazy and Entitled Fiction Project.
That's right.
We have details we're not sharing yet.
Not yet.
About that. That's super exciting. So we're kind of in R&D phase, I think, for that.
Yeah. Outlining, planning.
I also have a sketch show that we're releasing an episode every week for this year. It's very short, kind of absurd, classic 2000 to 2010 type of internet sketch.
Yeah, I would say so. I would say it's an early 21st century throwback, yeah.
Yeah, kind of thing. And then, like I was kind of talking about earlier, is like a both personal and professional thing is to like develop more food skills, because I've been able to identify that this is something I value deeply. That like food and food preparation, I like this. This is an aspect of service I really like. Coffee, I really like. I like the cafe environment that I'm in. And I'm getting more opportunities in that environment to learn more about baking and food prep and taking a bigger hand in that.
Yeah.
So as far as goal-wise, I'm going to pursue that both professionally and personally, as far as like I'm challenging myself to bake a lot of bread this year, make some more pastry type stuff. I got cookbooks both from you, from my wife, that I have goals to just like be making recipes out of, and I'm like hitting those goals, which feels really nice. Good. I've already made like 5 or 6 recipes out of my new cookbook, which is very cool. So
nice.
I hope that counts. Those feel like my personal, professional goals.
Those are great goals. And that's another thing for 23-year-old me. I wish I could internalize the concept that like you can have goals in your professional and your working life that aren't like LinkedIn brained, you know? Like you just be like, I work at a coffee shop, so now I am like learning baking better. And like I tried to do that when I was on the boats, I guess, but like there's nothing really you can I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, it feels connected to me in the sense of like the way that I engage with art, and I've had to, or creative practices in general, of like I need it to be authentic to me.
Sure.
And I mean, obviously my job is motivated by money, but like, I mean, to be real, I could get this job anywhere. Like, you know what I mean? As far as like, so it's not necessarily motivated by the sense of like, I'm going to make money off of this, whether it be writing a song or writing a piece or making a sketch thing, or even like pursuing baking and stuff. Like that kind of is like a deeper thing of like, it's truly something I believe in,
Yeah.
love, and like I do it almost purely for the craft of it and the idea that this connects me to other humans.
Hell yeah.
Not for the idea that like this is gonna be my source of income
Sure,
forever.
sure, yeah.
Yeah.
That's great. That's great. And yeah, that's what you do in a day.
I hope that was good for the guinea pig test version of this segment.
It was great. It was great. Thank you. Now it's time for Worker of the Week, our alliteratively named segment, even though this is a monthly podcast so far. Brendan, I think you have this week's Worker of the Week.
I do. For our first Worker of the Week, I'm picking